Did I betray my daughter by exposing what she hid from her ex? I am in the middle of a massive family fallout right now, and I honestly cannot tell whether I did the right thing or completely crossed the line. My daughter and her former partner, whom I will call Daniel, are both in their mid-20s now. They became parents very young and spent years building a life together. They never married, although his family constantly pushed for it because of their strict religious beliefs. I heard more than one comment over the years about them living in sin because they were unmarried. Everything fell apart about a year ago when my daughter discovered Daniel had been unfaithful. During the chaos that followed, it also came out that he was attracted to men. The breakup was ugly, emotional, and painful for everyone involved, especially with a child in the middle of it. In the end, they settled on shared custody. What happened next was heartbreaking. Daniel's family reacted horribly when they found out about his sexuality. They completely rejected him. I was there helping my daughter pack her things when I heard his own mother scream hateful insults at him. It was one of the ugliest things I have ever witnessed. After that, his family cut him off entirely. Despite discerning their own son, they still expected access to their grandchild. Daniel refused, understandably. At one point, they even contacted me directly while I was babysitting, asking if they could see the child without him knowing. I refused immediately because I thought it was completely inappropriate. The custody arrangement has been difficult for my daughter emotionally. She struggles with missing holidays and important moments when the child is with Daniel. Sometimes Daniel has been flexible, allowing her extra time for special occasions, which I thought was generous considering how tense things had been between them. Then recently, my daughter came by my house to pick something up and showed me photos from a weekend outing. In the background, I recognized Daniel's mother and other members of his family. I was shocked and asked what they were doing there. That is when she casually admitted she had been secretly taking their child to visit them for months. I immediately asked whether Daniel knew they had reconnected, assuming maybe there had been some reconciliation. She told me no, that he had no idea. I was furious. I told her it was deeply wrong to hide this from him, especially given how cruel those people had been to their own son. To me, it felt unforgivable that she would willingly bring her child around people who had rejected and humiliated their own family member over his identity. She became defensive immediately, saying they still deserved a relationship with the child. The argument escalated fast, and I finally told her I was disgusted by what she was doing. Afterward, I made the decision to tell Daniel everything. He thanked me for being honest with him, but the fallout has been intense. My daughter is living with me now. Apparently Daniel has stopped being flexible with custody arrangements after learning the truth, which means she no longer gets extra time with the child outside the official schedule. Now my daughter blames me for damaging what little cooperation they still had left, while I feel like I could not stay silent about something so serious. Still, part of me wonders whether I should have stayed out of it entirely instead of stepping into the middle of their parenting situation. Was I wrong for exposing my sister's lie in front of her friends? I honestly still cannot believe this even happened, and now my family is acting like I am the one who crossed the line. I'm 24 and have been living alone in a really nice apartment for almost a year now. It is the first place that truly feels like mine, and I worked hard for it. My younger sister and I have always been close, so when I moved in, I gave her a spare key for emergencies and convenience. At the time, it felt completely normal. In the beginning, I liked having her over. But slowly it became constant. She started showing up almost every day, even when I was exhausted from work and just wanted quiet and privacy. I tried not to complain because I knew she was frustrated living at home and dreamed of having her own place someday. Then things started getting strange. Over the last few months, she became oddly attached to my apartment. She would constantly talk about the style, mention how she would decorate it differently, or joke about rearranging things. At first I laughed it off, but then I started noticing little changes around the apartment when I got home. Decorations moved. Furniture shifted slightly. Things that I knew I had not touched. Eventually, I realized she had been letting herself in while I was at work. I should have confronted her then, but I kept telling myself it was not worth starting a fight over. Then, a couple of weeks ago, I overheard something at a party that completely changed how I saw the situation. I walked past my sister talking to someone and heard her referring to her apartment. One of the people she was speaking to even mentioned how nice it looked in photos. That is when it hit me that she had apparently been showing people pictures of my home and pretending it belonged to her. A few days later, I came home unexpectedly and found her sitting on my couch with someone I had never met before. She looked panicked the moment she saw me and rushed out with some excuse. Then it happened again with a couple of relatives, except this time she barely reacted when I walked in. After that, I finally texted her and told her she needed to ask permission before bringing people into my apartment. Her response was just a cold, one-letter reply. For a little while after that, she started acting unusually sweet toward me, which honestly made me suspicious. But I could not figure out what she was doing. Then came last night. I got home after an exhausting shift and opened the door to find 5 strangers in my living room drinking and laughing while my sister hosted them like she owned the place. I was completely stunned. I immediately told everyone to leave. My sister tried pulling me aside to talk privately, but I was beyond angry at that point. I repeated myself louder, telling them all to get out. That is when one of her friends looked confused and asked why I was even there. Something in me snapped. I yelled that I lived there, not my sister, and that she still lived with our parents. The room went silent. Everyone grabbed their things and left almost immediately. Now my family is furious with me. They say I humiliated her and embarrassed her in front of her friends. Apparently she has been devastated ever since. But I genuinely do not understand what they expected me to do. She was bringing strangers into my home, pretending it belonged to her and acting like I was the intruder in my own apartment. Still, the reaction from everyone around me has made me wonder if I went too far by exposing her like that in front of everyone instead of handling it privately. I know I can be emotional when I'm angry, but this whole situation felt surreal, and I still cannot believe my sister was doing this at all. Am I wrong for giving my niece more than her step-siblings? I have found myself in the middle of a family situation that is becoming increasingly uncomfortable, and I genuinely do not know whether I am being unfair or simply maintaining reasonable boundaries. I am 40 years old, and years ago I joined a small technology company very early on that eventually became incredibly successful. When it was sold, it changed my family's financial future permanently. I'm not endlessly wealthy, but I live very comfortably, and I have always wanted to share that good fortune with the people closest to me. I have an older brother, and he has a daughter named Lily who is now in her early teens. I have always been especially close to her. I only have boys, and they absolutely adore their cousin. When she was younger, she spent a lot of time around our house helping out with the younger children and becoming a huge part of our daily lives. Because of the closeness, my husband and I naturally started doing things for her over the years. Even before our financial situation improved dramatically, we helped pay for her education and included her in family vacations. As our lifestyle changed, so did the opportunities we could offer her. We created a large education fund for our future, made sure she would be able to pursue advanced degrees if she wanted, and planned for her to eventually have financial support toward buying a home one day. We also travel often and frequently bring her along on international trips and holidays. Her parents have always been supportive and grateful, and until recently, there had never been tension about it. The issue started after Lily's mother married a few years ago. Her husband has 2 children from a previous relationship, both teenagers around Lily's age. The household struggles financially, and while everyone gets along reasonably well on the surface, the differences between the children's lifestyles have become impossible to ignore. Lily attends a private school, travels internationally, and experiences things that other children simply do not. Meanwhile, her step-siblings attend public school and live a much more modest life. Apparently resentment has been building for years, especially from the stepfather, who feels it is unfair that one child in the household receives opportunities far beyond what the others can access. Recently, Lily's mother approached me very carefully and admitted that her husband wanted her to speak to me. She asked whether my husband and I would consider paying for the other children's schooling as well, including them more deeply in gifts and vacations so the differences would not feel so extreme within the home. She made it very clear she personally understood that these children are not my responsibility, but she also said her husband believes it is cold and unfair to treat children living under the same roof so differently. The problem is that I barely know these children. They are not family members I help raise or build years of closeness with. I do not dislike them at all, but my relationship with them is nowhere near what I have with my niece. From my perspective, the support we give Lily comes from a deeply personal bond, not some obligation to provide equally for every child connected to her household. Still, I cannot ignore the emotional reality of the situation. I understand how difficult it must be for those children to constantly compare their lives to hers. At the same time, I feel uncomfortable with the idea that my generosity toward one child suddenly creates an expectation that I should financially support others I hardly know. Now I'm questioning whether I am being reasonable for drawing that line, or if continuing this imbalance inside their blended family makes me more responsible for the tension than I want to admit. Was I wrong for snapping at a stranger over the sidewalk? I had just finished a long day at work and was walking home after stopping at the store. I was already tired and irritated, just trying to get home without dealing with anything stressful. As I was walking down the sidewalk, I noticed a couple coming toward me holding hands. They were stretched across the entire path and were not leaving any room for anyone else to pass. I stayed on my side, expecting one of them to shift over as people normally do. But the closer we got, the more obvious it became that neither of them planned to move. Eventually, we were almost face to face, and instead of squeezing myself into the road, I stopped walking completely. That is when the woman looked at me and said that she was autistic and that this was the side she walked on. I was caught off guard and honestly frustrated. In the moment, it sounded less like an explanation and more like a demand that everyone else accommodate her without compromise. Based on what I understood about autism, I found the situation confusing, especially since she seemed perfectly comfortable walking closely with her partner and speaking directly to a stranger. So instead of responding calmly, I snapped and told her to get lost in much harsher language. After a brief awkward pause, she eventually walked around me anyway, though she looked genuinely shocked by my reaction. Now that I have had time to think about it, I am wondering if I completely misread the situation. Part of me still feels annoyed because it seemed unreasonable for 2 people to block the entire sidewalk and expect others to move for them. But another part of me realizes I probably handled it badly and may have made assumptions about autism based only on their limited understanding. I keep thinking that if her partner knew she needed to stay on a specific side, he could have switched places with her to make room. Still, that does not change the fact that I reacted aggressively almost immediately instead of simply asking them to move or stepping around the situation more calmly. Now I am left wondering whether my frustration was understandable or whether my response crossed the line completely. Should I remove my doormat because a neighbour's child is scared of it? My wife and I have lived in our apartment building for several years, and we are both really into horror movies and spooky decorations year-round. A couple of years ago, we bought a horror-themed doormat featuring a creepy clown character, and we have kept it outside our door ever since. For us, it is not some seasonal decoration. It is just part of our style and something we enjoy. Recently, a new family moved into the apartment directly across from us. They have 2 young children, one still a baby and the other probably preschool age. The first interaction we had with them was friendly enough. While carrying groceries inside, I introduced myself and the father jokingly commented about us still celebrating Halloween. I laughed it off and did not think much of it. Not long after that though, strange things started happening. We would come home and find our doormat flipped upside down. At first we did not want to make a big deal about it, so we just turned it back over. But it kept happening repeatedly, and eventually we checked our door camera and saw that it was the neighbours doing it. We finally confronted the situation after catching them in the act. When we asked what the problem was, they explained that the young son was apparently frightened of the doormat. The strange thing was that while this conversation was happening, the child himself seemed perfectly calm. He was not crying or hiding or reacting at all. The only person who seemed genuinely upset was the mother, who immediately became rude and started speaking to us aggressively. My wife waited until they went back inside and quietly turned the doormat back the right way. I stayed outside and spoke with the father for a bit longer, and honestly, he seemed reasonable. He acknowledged that it was our apartment and our property, and he even said he thought his son was old enough to understand that the image could not hurt him. So I thought the issue was mostly settled. Then this morning we opened our door and found the doormat completely gone from outside our apartment. Someone had thrown it down outside the stair with several floors below. It clearly was not an accident. Someone had deliberately carried it away and tossed it. Now my wife wants to report the situation to building management because technically someone tampered with our property. Part of me agrees with her, but another part of me is exhausted by the entire situation and wonders if it would just be easier to throw the mat away and avoid more drama. At the same time, it frustrates me that we are even in this position over something sitting outside our own door. So now I'm stuck wondering whether we are being inconsiderate for keeping it despite the child's fear, or whether the neighbours crossed the line by repeatedly touching and eventually throwing away something that belongs to us. Was I wrong for thinking our engagement gifts belonged to both of us? My partner and I recently got engaged after being together for several years, and this weekend her family hosted a big engagement celebration for us. It was a really nice event, and afterward we brought home a stack of cards and gifts from relatives and family friends. When we started opening them together later that evening, a lot of the cards had money inside, which honestly surprised me because people were very generous. While we were going through everything, I commented on how kind her family had been and said it would really help with wedding expenses or things we need together as a couple. That is when she casually said the money was actually hers. I was confused at first because the cards were addressed to both of us, and the entire event was celebrating our engagement, not just her individually. So I told her I thought the money should count as something for both of us, especially since we are planning a future together and a wedding together. She disagreed immediately. Her argument was that because the gifts came from her side of the family, and money should belong only to her. I told her I did not think that made sense. To me, engagement gifts are meant for the couple, regardless of which side of the family they come from. I also admitted that it felt selfish to automatically claim all of it for herself when the cards clearly included both our names. That did not go over well. She accused me of trying to benefit from her family's generosity, which honestly frustrated me because from my perspective, she was the one treating shared gifts like personal income. We went back and forth for a while, but she kept repeating that because the money came from her relatives, it was hers to keep. Now I am second guessing whether I am looking at this the wrong way. Part of me genuinely thought engagement gifts were intended for the couple as a unit, especially when they are addressed to both people. But maybe there are unspoken expectations around family gifts that I do not understand. At this point, I cannot tell whether I was being reasonable in expecting the money to be shared, or if I came across as entitled by assuming I had any claim to gifts that originated from her family. Did I betray my partner by keeping his daughter's secret? I have been with my partner for nearly 5 years, and for the last 2 years we have all been living together as a blended family. He has 2 daughters, one in her early teens and one younger, and I also have a young daughter of my own. Building a relationship with his girls has not always been easy, especially with the older one. She is at that age where emotions are intense, independence matters a lot, and every rule feels personal. I've always tried to respect her space while still helping maintain structure in the house, which has caused some tension between us over time. Because of that, I have constantly felt like I was walking a tightrope trying to become someone she could trust without acting like I was replacing her mother or policing her life too heavily. Recently she developed a crush on a boy from school. She would talk about him occasionally around the house, smiling every time his name came up, clearly completely caught up in the excitement of a first real crush. My partner, however, reacted badly when he found out who the boy was. Apparently he had unpleasant experiences years ago with the boy's father and immediately decided the son must be trouble too. He told her directly that the boy was probably not someone she should be interested in, and basically dismissed the whole thing before it had even begun. I could see how crushed she felt afterward. She stopped bringing the boy up around him entirely. Then last weekend something happened that honestly felt like a breakthrough in my relationship with her. We spent the day together at an event, just the two of us, and during the drive home she suddenly opened up to me in a way she never really had before. She admitted that she and the boy had started talking more seriously and were sort of unofficially together. She looked both thrilled and terrified while telling me. Then she asked me not to tell her father yet. She explained that after his early reaction, she did not feel emotionally safe talking to him about it right now. She said she wanted a little time to figure out whether the relationship was even real before dealing with his judgment and anger. She promised she would eventually tell him herself once she felt more certain. I thought carefully before answering her. In my mind, this was not something dangerous or urgent. She was not sneaking out, putting herself at risk, or hiding something serious. This was a nervous teenage girl confiding in someone she finally trusted. So I promised I would not tell him, but I encouraged her to have the conversation with him herself when she felt ready. Honestly, I felt proud afterward because it was the first time I truly felt accepted by her. But everything fell apart yesterday. Her younger sister accidentally mentioned the boyfriend in front of my partner, completely unintentionally. He immediately turned to me and asked whether I knew about this already. I admitted that I did. The atmosphere changed instantly. Now he is furious with me for keeping it from him. He says I should never keep secrets about his daughters, and he feels betrayed that I knew something important and deliberately withheld it. What hurts most is that he refuses to acknowledge why she hid it from him in the first place. His harsh reaction earlier made her afraid to open up to him. Now he is barely speaking to either of us. His daughter is devastated because the exact reaction she feared has happened, and I feel stuck in the middle wondering whether I handled this completely wrong. Part of me understands why a parent would want to know about their child's relationships. But another part of me feels like if I had broken her confidence immediately, I would have destroyed any chance of building trust with her going forward. Now I cannot tell whether I protected an important bond with his daughter or crossed a line I should never have crossed. Was I wrong for telling a hospital nurse to stop lecturing me? I have spent the past week helping my mother after she injured her foot badly enough that she can barely get around. I have been driving her to appointments, carrying groceries, helping around the house, basically doing everything I can to make things easier for her while she recovers. She is still fairly young, but after several exhausting days, she was already worn down before we even arrived at the emergency room. The hospital was absolute chaos from the moment we walked in. There were no wheelchairs available anywhere in the emergency department, so my mother was struggling to balance on crutches while standing in long lines. She was visibly exhausted and in pain. During triage, the nurse told me to go search the building for a wheelchair because they apparently had none left nearby. I started walking off but quickly realized I had no idea where I was supposed to go. I returned to ask for clarification, and a paramedic nearby mentioned she did not think there were any available at the front entrance either. Before she could even finish, the triage nurse cut her off sharply and said something along the lines of, "She does not know what she is talking about. I work here, not her." The paramedic looked irritated by that comment but kindly offered to walk me to the main entrance anyway because I had never been to that hospital before and clearly looked lost. When we got there was a row of wheelchairs. The paramedic grabbed one and I grabbed another from the exact same area. The only difference was that mine felt slightly damp. Since I had recently been at another hospital where staff regularly sanitized wheelchairs before stacking them, I assumed it had simply been cleaned moments earlier. So I brought it back. The second I rolled into the emergency room, the triage nurse suddenly started speaking to me like I was some irresponsible teenager. She launched into this long lecture about being inconsiderate, about how people need to take better care of elderly patients, and about how I needed to do better. The way she spoke made it sound like I had deliberately done something cruel to my own mother. I was honestly stunned. My mother is not even elderly. She's in her 50s, fully alert, and standing right there. I had spent the entire week helping her non-stop, and now I was being treated like I had neglected her because I unknowingly grabbed a wheelchair that apparently was not clean enough. I never yelled. I never insulted her. I simply said calmly, "Please stop scolding me." That somehow made things even worse. She immediately started criticizing me for saying that and continued lecturing me about respecting older people and needing to behave better. At that point I felt trapped in this bizarre conversation where every attempt to politely end it only encouraged her to continue. I finally had to repeat several times that I just wanted her to stop. Eventually she did, but the whole interaction left me shaken and embarrassed. My mother later told me I probably should have stayed quiet because arguing with hospital staff never helps anything. But honestly, I do not even feel like I argued. I felt like I was trying to defend myself from being publicly talked down to while already stressed and overwhelmed. Now I keep replaying the situation in my head, wondering if I should have just apologized and moved on, or whether it was reasonable to ask someone to stop speaking to me like I was a horrible person over an honest mistake. Was I wrong for telling my daughter-in-law to stop crying? I am being pressured to apologize to my daughter-in-law, but I honestly do not feel like I did anything terrible, and now I am wondering if I am missing something. She is an extremely emotional person, and to put it plainly, almost any kind of criticism or correction ends with her in tears. It has become difficult for the whole family because even the smallest issue somehow turns into a situation where everyone rushes to comfort her while the other person gets treated like a villain. There have been many moments over the years that built up this frustration for me. One example that still stands out happened at my house when she walked through with muddy shoes on. I calmly asked her to take them off, and instead of simply doing it, she burst into tears because she said my tone upset her. I did not yell, insult her, or embarrass her. My daughter was there and even agreed I had spoken normally. Yes, somehow it became an emotional ordeal, and afterward my son lectured me about being more careful with her feelings. That pattern has repeated itself over and over. The crying is never subtle either. It is loud, immediate, and impossible to ignore, which instantly changes the atmosphere in the room. It feels like everyone has to stop what they are doing to comfort her while whoever upset her gets blamed, even when the original issue was minor. The situation that caused this latest conflict happened during a family birthday party for my granddaughter. There were children everywhere, and one little boy there has a reputation for saying rude things without thinking. His parents are actively working on it, but he is still very young and has no filter. At one point during the party, my daughter-in-law was helping hand out food when this child bluntly called her fat. His parents reacted immediately and pulled him aside, clearly embarrassed. But my daughter-in-law started crying right there in the middle of the party, and it quickly became loud enough that people were staring. I was worried it was going to completely derail the birthday celebration, so I took her aside privately and told her she needed to calm down. I said it was a comment from a very young child and that she should not let it turn into a scene at a little girl's birthday party. I also told her not to come back out until she had composed herself. Instead, she went to sit in the car and never returned to the party. Later, my son confronted me angrily, saying I had been insensitive and cruel. From my perspective, though, she is an adult, and the comment came from a child barely old enough to understand what he was saying. Now my son insists I owe her an apology, but I still feel like I was trying to keep the focus on the birthday instead of letting the entire event become centered around her emotions. At the same time, I know I can come across as blunt, and I am starting to wonder if I handled the situation more harshly than I intended. Was I wrong for walking out after my sister brought her boyfriend? I had been really excited for a full day with my sister because we honestly do not get much one-on-one time anymore. I am 20, she is a little older, and we had planned what was supposed to be a classic sister day together. The plan was brunch, shopping, getting our nails done, and maybe seeing a movie afterward if anything looked good. It sounded simple, relaxing, and exactly what I needed. On the day of, I arrived first and got us a table. A few minutes later, my sister walked in, but she was not alone. She had brought the guy she had recently started seeing. I was caught completely off guard because she had never mentioned he would be joining us. For context, my sister tends to move quickly through relationships. She will date someone for a short time, lose interest, and then move on, so I had not even expected this relationship to last long enough for him to become part of family outings. At this point, they had only been together a few weeks. I tried not to make things awkward and stayed polite while we ordered food. But when he stepped away for a moment, I asked her quietly why she had brought him along when we had specifically planned a girls' day together. She casually said she did not want him to feel excluded, which honestly confused me because he had never been invited in the first place. Then things became even more uncomfortable. Since my sister and I usually take turns paying when we go out together, I mentioned that I assumed he would cover his own meal. She looked at me like I was being strange and initially implied that I should pay because technically it was my turn. But when she saw my reaction, she quickly said she would pay for him herself. At that point, though, the mood was already ruined for me. I could not stop thinking about how the entire day had changed without her even asking me. I had been looking forward to shopping together, trying on clothes, talking privately, and just spending time as sisters. Instead, I suddenly felt like a third wheel in my own plans, dragging around a guy I barely knew through activities he probably did not even want to do. So once we finished eating and left the restaurant, I made an excuse and went home instead. Now my sister keeps messaging me asking what happened and why I suddenly left. I know I probably should have explained myself directly in the moment, but I was frustrated and did not want to start an argument in public. At the same time, I cannot tell if I overreacted by leaving instead of just trying to make the best of it. Did I go too far telling my daughter her situation is her undoing? This situation has been building for years, and after another argument in the car, I finally snapped at my oldest daughter. Now my wife thinks I crossed the line, but honestly I feel like I reached the end of my patience. I have 2 daughters. My younger daughter, who I will call Chloe, is about to finish university and recently accepted a very good job offer with a major company. She worked incredibly hard for years, earned scholarships, stayed focused, and managed to graduate without debt. Everyone in the family is proud of her because she really sacrificed a lot to get where she is. My older daughter, who I will call Natalie, had a very different path. She started university but gradually stopped attending classes, lost interest, and eventually failed out after her grades collapsed. Since then, she has been working in restaurants and struggling financially while also carrying a large amount of student debt. I have genuinely tried to support her over the years. I've helped her financially when I could, encouraged her to return to school or look into career programs, and tried to motivate her without making her feel judged. But over time, something changed in her attitude. Instead of focusing on improving her own situation, she became increasingly resentful of her younger sister. Every accomplishment Chloe reaches seems to upset her. If Chloe buys something nice, Natalie makes comments. If Chloe talks about work, Natalie shuts down or becomes sarcastic. Family celebrations have started feeling tense because everything somehow circles back to comparisons between them. The latest blow-up happened after dinner a few nights ago. Chloe casually mentioned she was planning a trip overseas later this year now that she had secured her job. It was not some bragging speech. It was just a quick, excited comment about finally being able to travel after years of studying and saving. The second we got into the car afterward, Natalie exploded. She started ranting about how unfair everything was and how Chloe gets to have an exciting life while she struggles just to pay bills. Then the comments became more personal and cruel. She started insulting her sister, acting like Chloe did not deserve any of her success and implying she had somehow just gotten lucky. That is when I finally lost my temper. I told her she needed to stop being jealous and accept that the reason her life looks different right now is because of the choices she made. I reminded her that nobody forced her to skip classes or throw away opportunities she had been given. I said it was unfair to constantly punish her sister emotionally for succeeding. The argument got ugly after that. Natalie accused me of favouring her sister and acting like she's a failure. She has barely spoken to me since. My wife later told me that while she understood my frustration, she thought the way I phrased it was too harsh and probably humiliating. Now I keep wondering whether I gave my daughter a reality check she genuinely needed, or whether I kicked her while she was already struggling and made things even worse between us. Did I go too far with my classroom complaint hotline? I work with first graders, and lately my classroom had started to feel less like a school and more like the customer service desk at a grocery store. Every few minutes someone was dramatically reporting another child for something completely ridiculous. I could barely finish a sentence without hearing complaints about somebody humming too loudly, blinking weirdly, stealing an extra crayon, or breathing in someone's direction. At one point, 2 children nearly collided sprinting across the room because both desperately needed to tell me that another student had burped during reading time. It became non-stop. I was losing huge chunks of teaching time every day because the children treated every tiny annoyance like a national emergency. The constant interruptions were driving me insane, and honestly, I could feel myself becoming impatient with them, which I hated. So over spring break, I came up with what I thought was a funny and harmless solution. I found this oversized toy microphone recorder online that looked like something from a pretend news station. When school started again, I dramatically introduced it to the class as the complaint hotline. I even made a little cardboard station in the corner with fake buttons and signs. Before letting them use it though, I sat everyone down for a serious talk. We went over the difference between problems that need an adult immediately versus things that are just annoying. I told them if somebody was hurt, scared, being bullied, or unsafe, they should always come directly to me. But if the complaint was something like Mason touched my pencil for 1 second or Ella keeps saying the dinosaur song, they could report it to the hotline instead. The kids thought it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. Suddenly, instead of interrupting math lessons every 30 seconds, children were lining up at the little station to dramatically whisper complaints into the microphone like tiny reporters exposing scandals. Some of the recordings were unbelievable. One child reported another for looking suspicious during snack time. Another claimed someone peeled a banana aggressively. The best part was that classroom interruptions almost disappeared overnight. The students still felt heard, but I could actually teach again without chaos every 5 seconds. Then everything exploded. One afternoon, a furious parent stormed into the school office demanding to speak with me. Her son had gone home upset because he tried to tell me another child called his drawing ugly, and instead of stopping class to deal with it, I apparently told him to take it to the hotline. The parent accused me of humiliating the children and teaching them their feelings were unimportant. She said I had basically created a joke out of children asking adults for help. She was so angry that the principal had to step into the meeting. Now the situation has divided the staff. Some teachers think it is one of the funniest and smartest classroom management ideas they have ever had because the students still have an outlet without derailing every lesson. Others think I crossed a line and accidentally taught the children that adults do not want to hear from them. Meanwhile, the children are obsessed with the thing. They treat it like a celebrity confessional booth and beg to use it constantly. I honestly thought I had solved a classroom problem in a creative way, but now I am wondering if I accidentally turned myself into the villain teacher parents complain about online. Did I ruin my wedding by refusing to invite their grandmother? I feel like my wedding is turning into another battle from a divorce that happened years ago, and now I am wondering if I am being unreasonable or finally drawing a boundary I should have set long ago. About 7 years ago, my marriage ended after a major conflict over my former wife's mother. At the time, I was the parent staying home with the children while my wife worked, and she decided she wanted her elderly mother to move in with us permanently. I was strongly against it. I knew exactly what would happen if she moved in. The responsibility of caring for her would fall on me, and I did not want to become a full-time caregiver. I suggested assisted living instead, but my former wife made it clear she was moving her mother in no matter what. Since she was the primary earner, she basically told me the decision was already made. That conflict became one of the major reasons our marriage ended. After the divorce, I went back to work and only managed to get weekend custody. I tried for more time with the children, but financially I was not in a strong position back then. Unfortunately, after the divorce, the caregiving responsibility slowly shifted onto my children whenever they were at their mother's house. What started as helping out became a major part of their lives. Even now, years later, my 3 children, all now adults, still live there and spend a huge amount of time caring for their grandmother while their mother works long hours to support everyone. I've argued with my former wife about this for years because I believe my children were pushed into adult responsibilities far too young. They love their grandmother, but I can see how exhausted and resentful they have become. I have repeatedly offered for them to move in with me full time, but they always say they cannot leave because no one else would take care of her. Now I'm getting remarried, and I thought at least this milestone would be simple. My children already knew the wedding date long in advance, so when invitations went out, I assumed everything was fine. Then my oldest called and said the grandmother needed to be invited too because otherwise none of them could attend. I said no immediately. The truth is, I've never had a good relationship with her. She treated me badly for years, even before the marriage fell apart, and I do not want her at my wedding. I told my daughter their mother could arrange care for one evening, especially with so much notice. My daughter responded that her mother would likely still be working and that there would be no one else to watch her. I still refused. I said their mother would need to figure something out because their grandmother was not invited. That is when the conversation exploded. My daughter accused me of abandoning the family years ago and said this was just another example of me refusing to step up. I argued that I was not abandoning anyone and that my children were fully welcome to attend. I simply did not want someone at my wedding who had played such a negative role in my life. Now all 3 of my children have told me they will not come unless the grandmother can come too. At this point, I honestly do not know if I am standing my ground reasonably or letting all resentment destroy my relationship with my children even further. Was I wrong for refusing to defend my sister after she got kicked out? My sister and I are both in our 20s, then despite having full-time jobs, we still live with our parents. Honestly, in our area it just makes financial sense. Rent anywhere near the city is outrageously expensive, and neither of us wants to spend most of our income on a tiny apartment or waste hours every week commuting from somewhere cheaper. My parents live close enough to the city that we can both get to work quickly, so staying home has allowed us to save a lot of money. The arrangement has always come with one major rule though. Nobody is allowed to bring someone home overnight without asking our parents first. To some people that might sound strict considering we are adults, but there is a reason behind it. Years ago, one of my older brothers brought someone home casually and the situation turned into a complete disaster. The woman ended up stealing from the house and accidentally starting a small kitchen fire before leaving. Nobody got hurt, but after that my parents completely changed their attitude about strangers staying over. Ever since then, the rule has been non-negotiable. Personally, I do not really care. If I'm dating someone, I would rather go to their place anyway. I also honestly find it uncomfortable bringing people back to the room I grew up in. So the rule has never affected me much. My sister, however, absolutely hates it. She argues with my parents about it constantly and says they are controlling and treating her like a child. My parents always tell her the same thing: if she wants to spend the night with someone, she can stay at their place or get a hotel. Their view is simple. As long as she lives under their roof for free, she follows their rules. Well, last night everything exploded. My sister brought a woman home anyway, apparently assuming our parents would not notice. Unfortunately for her, my parents saw the woman leaving early in the morning on the security camera by the front door. The argument that followed was massive. My parents completely lost their patience and told my sister she has 1 month to move out. There was yelling all over the house, accusations flying back and forth, and my sister crying that they were overreacting. Afterwards she came to me expecting me to back her up and convince our parents to change their minds. But I refused. I told her honestly that she knew exactly what the rule was and why it existed. It was not some surprise policy they suddenly invented. She chose to ignore it anyway, assuming there would not be consequences.